Robin Leach and Grand Marshal Joe DiMaggio voyage up Fifth Avenue for the Columbus Day Parade. Monday at noon, live on Channel 11.
And from my standpoint, as a black American, as far as I'm concerned, it is a high-tech lynching for uppity blacks who in any way deign to think for themselves, to do for themselves, to have different ideas. And it is a message that unless you kowtow to an old order, this is what will happen to you.
From Channel 11, this is the News at 10.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sheila Steinbeck.
And I'm Marvin Scott. X-rated and extraordinary. That's the way it's been all day long, with millions glued to their television sets as senators scrutinize the sexual harassment charges against Supreme Court nominee Clarence Thomas, the most sensational hearing since Watergate. We begin our team coverage now with Mark Mooney in Washington.
The network bosses couldn't have counter-programmed the soaps with a more gripping daytime drama. But what's become the biggest sideshow in Supreme Court nomination history, the Clarence Thomas-Anita Hill standoff, was painfully real. The man who seemed so elusive and detached before this panel just a few weeks ago came out fighting for his name, throwing White House scripting aside to describe in the most personal terms the hurt he feels and to denounce the whole nomination process itself.
This is Kafkaesque. It has got to stop. It must stop for the benefit of future nominees.
In the end, Thomas denied he sexually harassed his former aide at the EEOC, but apologized for any misunderstanding that may have resulted from statements he made. Anita Hill was less charitable, describing in almost emotionless terms Thomas's relentless pursuit of her for dates at the Department of Education and then the EEOC. After repeatedly turning down invitations she thought improper for a professional relationship, Hill says Thomas made lurid remarks about video pornography he'd seen.
Well, this was a reference to an individual who had a very large penis, and he used the name that he had been referred to in the pornographic material.
Do you recall what it was?
Yes, I do. The name that was referred to was Long Dong Silver.
Hill says Thomas said these things to her in his office, sometimes in hers. But she says lewd remarks from her supervisor came in waves over several years and included commentary on his own anatomy.
He referred to the size of his own penis as being larger than normal, and he also spoke on some occasions of the pleasures he had given to women with oral sex.
As if that wasn't bad enough, says Hill, she recounted what to her was the oddest episode she could remember in his office.
He got up from the table at which we were working, went over to his desk to get the Coke, looked at the can and asked, "Who has put pubic hair on my Coke?"
It was the disclosure of a confidential FBI interview of Anita Hill that forced senators to reopen the Thomas hearings. Republicans, angry and frustrated with the leak they charged Democrats with making, threatened to punish the culprits and more.
And he has a right to face the accuser and everything that accuser says. And if he doesn't, then I'm going to resign from this committee today. I'm telling you, I don't want to be on it.
Thomas's supporters tried to point out inconsistencies between Hill's FBI testimony and what she has said publicly since. And they hammered away at the 8 to 10 year time lag it took civil rights lawyer Hill to do something about behavior she considered both stressful to her health and against the law.
How could you allow this kind of reprehensible conduct to go on right in the headquarters without doing something about it?
I confess that I am very sorry that I did not do something or say something, but at the time that was my best judgment.
If what you say this man said to you occurred, why in God's name, when he left his position of power or status or authority over you, and you left it in 1983, why in God's name would you ever speak to a man like that the rest of your life?
That's a very good question.
Hill maintained throughout that over concern for her career, she didn't want to burn bridges with Thomas by making charges. And in one last appearance before the committee, Thomas got the last words that could make sleep for some senators difficult.
Senator, I would like to start by saying unequivocally, uncategorically, that I deny each and every single allegation against me today that suggested in any way that I had conversations of a sexual nature or about pornographic material with Anita Hill. As a black American, as far as I'm concerned, it is a high-tech lynching for uppity blacks who in any way deign to think for themselves, to do for themselves, to have different ideas. And it is a message that unless you kowtow to an old order, this is what will happen to you. You will be lynched, destroyed, caricatured by a committee of the U.S. Senate rather than hung from a tree.
The major networks hardly blinked at this story, going to regular programming today only once or twice. And despite assurances from the committee chairman, this is not a courtroom trial. It had all the feel of one. The American people on jury duty. In Washington, Mark Mooney, Channel 11, News at 10.
Well, of course, both Judge Thomas and Professor Hill are black, and that community has a special interest in the outcome of this confrontation. Among African Americans, though, there are sharp differences of opinion. Esmeralda Simmons is a civil rights lawyer for the Brooklyn-based Center for Law and Social Justice. Simmons worked for Judge Thomas in the Education Department. Not closely, she was based in New York. She does believe Anita Hill.
I find Professor Hill to be wholly credible. I've listened to her testimony. I think half of America was watching, if not more. And I find not only is her story believable, but I think it's typical of what thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of women experience in the workplace on a regular basis.
Outside the center where Simmons works, many blacks are not so quick to agree. They see it as a black woman standing in the way of a black man trying to move up.
I've seen her in the hearings today. I also heard of some other lady who creeped out of the woodwork all of a sudden from out of nowhere. It's, to me, like a hunt and peck game. I wouldn't even be surprised if someone paid her to make these accusations.
Well, I figure that he's just a black man trying to make it good. And now that he's up here, a lot of things from the past that may or may not have happened are coming out. And I don't think he's guilty at all.
Simmons is aware of the difference of opinion, but disagrees. She says the Senate confrontation should create honest debate in the African American community.
If this nominee has harassed women on the job, particularly in view of his position at the time, that he is not the African American we want to represent us on the bench.
I think it's a bunch of lies, because if she waited all this long, you know, it seems like a lie to me.
Well, I'm glad that she finally came out and said something about it. I'm just wondering why it took her so long. And if it is true, I hope he get what he deserves.
Well, the hearings are scheduled to continue through Saturday. Marvin?
Well, why are these hearings the talk of the town? Largely because it's not just the relationship between Judge Thomas and Professor Hill that's in the spotlight. Also at issue, a subject so many Americans have to confront: sexual harassment. Dave Browdy standing by live at the NYU campus with more on all of this. Dave?
Marvin, universities are one of the places where the issues of sexual harassment have been hotly debated. We're at New York University, the Weinstein Residence Hall, and students here have been keeping a close eye on the Thomas hearings. Some of them are with us now, including Joseph Naftali and Heike Leach. Joseph, let me ask you first. Beyond the issue of Judge Thomas, has the issue of sexual harassment been one that has been debated more since this came up than before?
I think definitely so. Not only on this campus, but in many other campuses, such as Yale, where they interviewed the two people from on the show before. It's definitely an issue that has been raised.
Heike Leach, you're a women's study major here. Do you think it's a healthy debate, or is there more hostility being generated by this?
As always with any topic dealing with women's issues, there's going to be hostility between conservatives and liberals. I think that this whole Thomas nomination has been a heyday on women's rights, beginning with the fact that this man is not pro-choice, and ending up with the fact that today we have a woman on trial, a very intelligent professor on trial for coming out and saying that this man had sexually harassed her.
Joseph, I know you disagree with that viewpoint. That to the extent that you think that the judge is having a rough time.
Oh no, the judge is not. I mean, the lawyer, the professor is having the hard time. Judge Thomas is denying everything and playing the political game very well. He really knows what he's doing.
Now, it is not just at the universities. It is also a very critical issue in one other area, and that is the workplace. It wasn't just in New York. In offices all across the country, the drama being played out in a Senate hearing room was debated, and not just with regard to Clarence Thomas. The question being asked, just where is that line between friendly relations and sexual harassment? Has it changed the way people in your office relate to each other?
Well, we did receive a memorandum concerning sexual harassment.
I think it's raising the issue almost more than it's raising the way people look at the judge, because most people are not legal experts and are not experts on Judge Thomas, but everybody thinks they're an expert on sexual harassment.
People are making a joke of it.
Making a joke?
Oh yeah, people walk around and say, you know, if I say hello to you, are you gonna go against me?
But there's also the question of this specific instance, and as the work week ended, the allegations against Judge Thomas were still being debated at the Capitol and here.
They're not going after him for the reasons that just sexual harassment, that it has other things to do with it.
You got to understand, the man was born in the 40s, if I'm right, you understand? They had a certain characteristic. He can't get rid of everything, you know, all at once.
Well, women, I think, naturally tend to take the woman's side, and men are taking Thomas's side.
The debate is continuing, as is the hearing, and of course it will all be resolved on Tuesday at 6 when the vote is scheduled. Reporting live from New York University, I'm Dave Browdy for the Channel 11 News at 10. Now back to you in the studio.
Dave, thank you. Well, Judge Thomas and Professor Hill are far from the only ones in the spotlight during these hearings. Also under scrutiny, a 98% male U.S. Senate, which many say almost slipped Anita Hill's allegations under the rug. Deborah Potter has more.
It wasn't just his reputation that was on trial, and it wasn't just her credibility. It was also theirs, the members of the committee and the Senate as a whole, damaged by charges they failed to do their jobs the first time around.
But I'm deeply sorry that our actions in this respect have been seen by many across this country as a sign that this committee does not take the charge of sexual harassment seriously. We emphatically do.
But the effort to recoup their prestige quickly foundered as the senators turned on each other.
Let me finish. No, I will not.
Well, yes, you will.
Let me make
yes, you will.
The dispute over whether Hill's statement to the FBI could be used in questioning Thomas.
He has a right to face the accuser and everything that accuser says, and if he doesn't, then I'm going to resign from this committee today.
The anger and tension that boiled over in the hearing room was fueled in part by what's happened to the confirmation process. No longer a review of professional qualifications, but a personal inquisition.
This is not American. This is Kafkaesque. It has got to stop. It must stop for the benefit of future nominees and our country. Enough is enough.
The Senate's botched handling of the Thomas nomination is just one more black mark against a Congress already sullied by scandal, like the recent check-bouncing flap in the House. And there could be some political fallout.
They could be facing a full-scale voter rebellion, and they're going to have to revise their procedures very quickly because the rules of the old boys club that prevailed in this hearing are simply not going to work anymore.
Within the Senate, there is acrimony and recrimination over who leaked what and who failed to pursue what. It has strained the spirit of cooperation so essential to making the Senate work.
That goes and comes. Tomorrow they'll have to have somebody's help, and they forget about their animosities, but it goes and comes and goes, and a lot of it's put on for show.
There's been tension like this before over other nominations, and as one senior staffer put it, the Senate will endure this and recover from this. The fate of Judge Thomas and his accuser are far less certain. Deborah Potters, Capitol Hill.
Well, how are our area senators reacting to this whirlwind of charges, countercharges, and testimony surrounding Judge Thomas? In New York, Democrat Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan and Republican Senator Alphonse D'Amato, both originally for confirming the judge, have moved into the undecided category. Across the Hudson, New Jersey Senators Bill Bradley and Frank Lautenberg remain opposed to the confirmation. As for Connecticut's two Democrats, Christopher Dodd remains undecided, and Joseph Lieberman says he's for confirming the judge, but will review the situation over the weekend.
And we will continue to keep you updated on the latest developments in these confirmation hearings as developments warrant later in the broadcast. Sheila.
Well, comedian Red Fox has suffered a heart attack in Los Angeles, and officials there say he's in extremely critical condition tonight. They say the 68-year-old comedian had the heart attack while rehearsing on the set of his new television show this afternoon, that show called The Royal Family. Fox is best known for his role as a junkman in the 1970s sitcom Sanford and Son.